Have you ever had a moment where something from your past comes crashing into your present? Completely unannounced, utterly unrecognizable, and yet, hauntingly familiar? A single letter. A few scribbled words on lined paper. An old-school friendship that you tucked away in a box years ago, maybe under your bed or in the attic. Forgotten but not gone. Now imagine this. What if that childhood connection you made back when the world was simpler, when crayons were currency and every mailbox felt like a doorway to a new world, turned out to be the key to a hidden life you never expected? A life of private jets, sprawling estates, deep secrets, and the kind of wealth most of us only see in tabloids and tech headlines. Hey there, yes you. Let's slow down for a second because I need you to really hear this. You didn't click this video by accident. I know exactly what drew you in. Her childhood pen pal turned out to be a reclusive billionaire. And I promise you before this video ends, you're going to find out exactly who he is, how she found out, and what happened when their worlds collided again after decades apart. This isn't just a feel-good story for the algorithm. This is about fate, timing, and the kind of quiet bond that never really goes away. It's about two kids, one in a small town, the other in a world of shadows, writing letters back and forth, not knowing they were scribbling the preface to a story that would shake both their lives to the core. If you've ever wondered whether your past can come back and rewrite your future, buckle up. Because this story doesn't just answer that question. It proves it. Now let me ask you something. Be honest with me. How many times have you looked back at your childhood and thought, what happened to that one friend? You know the one I'm talking about. That person you used to write to or share secrets with. Someone who just disappeared one day, either because life got messy, or the letters stopped, or the internet took over and pen pals turned into screen names. Maybe you remember the handwriting, or the way they signed off with something sweet or funny. Maybe it's been so long that you don't remember their last name, but you remember how they made you feel. Safe, heard, understood. That emotional memory is the one thing we never lose, no matter how much time passes. That's exactly how it was for Emily. Emily Morgan grew up in a sleepy little town in North Carolina, where summer days stretched long and the mailman was still a big deal. She was the kind of kid who spent hours in the library, asked big questions, and wrote letters like they were magic spells. Her parents encouraged it, especially her mom, who believed that writing to strangers made the world feel smaller and kinder. So when Emily joined a pen pal program in the 5th grade, it felt like just another school project at first. A fun way to practice writing, sure, but nothing more. What she didn't know then, what none of us could have predicted, was that one of those letters she wrote would start a connection that would stretch across decades, continents, and financial empires. And that the boy who used to send her doodles of dragons and stories about his pet hawk would one day sign his name at the bottom of billion-dollar contracts. But let's not jump too far ahead just yet. Let's stay in that moment with Emily, sitting cross-legged on her front porch, clutching the very first letter from her new pen pal. Z. No last name. Just Z. Mysterious, a little odd, but instantly intriguing. He wrote from somewhere cold, never gave away exact details, and yet, he saw her. He understood her in a way that felt otherworldly. Their letters weren't the typical, "What's your favorite color?" exchanges. They talked about constellations, about why people leave, about what makes a home feel like home. Z had a mind like an old soul trapped in a child's body, and Emily was drawn to it like gravity. Every week brought a new letter. Every envelope was a window into a mind that seemed older, wiser, and somehow always aching for something just out of reach. Now here's where things get interesting. After about a year and a half of writing, back and forth, rain or shine, Z suddenly disappeared. No warning. No explanation. One day, the letters just stopped coming. Emily wrote a dozen more, begging for an answer. Was he okay? Did something happen? Was she just forgotten? But there was only silence. 4 weeks. Then months. Then years. Until life moved on. High school. College. Career. Marriage. And eventually, divorce. Emily became a graphic designer in Raleigh. She kept her childhood letters in a dusty shoebox, tucked away in her closet. A forgotten chapter from a life that had gotten louder, messier, and a lot more grown up. She had no idea that across the country, on a private estate no one ever saw, someone else had kept every single one of her letters too. In a vault. Protected. Untouched. Until now. Because what Emily didn't know was that Z had become someone else entirely. Not just a person but a myth. A ghost in Silicon Valley. A billionaire tech visionary whose name was known only to the elite, and whose face hadn't been photographed in over a decade. He had built things: software, infrastructure, encrypted systems that governments and global corporations used every single day. His empire was estimated at over $23 billion, but nobody knew where he lived or what he looked like. He never did interviews. Never showed up at launches. Not even his board members had met him in person. He was a phantom in the world of excess. And yet, somewhere in that life of secrecy, Z never forgot the girl from North Carolina who once wrote him about the way magnolia trees made her cry. But here's the part that'll make your heart race, and it's why you have to stick around to the very end. Because one morning, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, Emily received a package at her doorstep. No return address. No name. Just a small, silver box wrapped in black twine. Inside was a letter, written in handwriting she hadn't seen in over 20 years. And beneath that letter, a key. A literal key. To what, she didn't know yet. But she would soon find out that this key didn't just open a door. It unlocked a reality she never dreamed she was part of. Now I want you to really think about this. What would you do if a person you thought was gone forever, a person you barely knew, but once knew better than anyone, suddenly re-entered your life from a place of unimaginable wealth and power? What if they had been watching your life unfold from afar, not in a creepy way, but in a protectively quiet way, making sure you were okay, waiting for the right moment to reappear? Would you be terrified? Excited? Angry? Would you trust them? This story isn't just about reunion. It's about rediscovery. It's about the lies we're told to protect us, and the truths that can change everything once revealed. It's about how money can build walls so high, even love can't always climb them. But maybe, just maybe, it's also about how a single thread of human connection, forged in childhood innocence, can survive decades of silence and come back stronger than ever. You're about to meet the people behind this unbelievable story. You'll see how Emily's world gets turned upside down as she begins to unlock the mystery of who Z really is, why he vanished, and why he's returned now, after all this time. You'll hear what was hidden in that first letter after 20 years. You'll go with her to the place the key leads. And you'll finally understand the heartbreak, the sacrifice, and the astonishing truth that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about love, fate, and timing. But first, there's one thing you need to know. One thing that will change how you view everything from here on out. The key wasn't just for her. It was for you too. Because once you see what's behind the door, there's no going back. Emily sat on her couch, staring at the letter like it might catch fire in her hands. Her coffee had gone cold on the side table, forgotten the moment she'd untied the black twine and unfolded that familiar slanted handwriting. She kept rereading the same first line over and over. I've never stopped writing to you, even when I stopped sending them. It didn't make sense. Her heart was pounding, not just with confusion but with something deeper, something strange and old. It was like a door inside her had creaked open after being sealed for 2 decades, and behind it were memories she didn't realize still had power. There was a warmth in his words, a vulnerability that hadn't changed, even after all this time. But there was also a weight, something unsaid, something she could feel pressing behind every sentence. She didn't know whether to cry or run or laugh at the absurdity of it all. After 20 years, her childhood pen pal, who she had assumed was either long gone or had grown up to be just another ordinary adult, was back. And not just back. He had been watching, waiting, planning. The key in the box was cold to the touch, small and silver, and shaped like something out of a Gothic novel. It wasn't for a regular door, that much was clear. It had intricate teeth and a small symbol engraved on the bow, 3 intersecting circles with it in the center. She took a photo of it and searched online, but nothing came up. Not even on reverse image search. That's when she knew, this wasn't just nostalgia knocking on her door. This was something bigger, deeper, and possibly dangerous. Emily wasn't the only one whose life had quietly orbited this mystery. On the other side of the country, in a heavily guarded compound just outside Lake Tahoe, a man stared at a screen in a darkened room, watching her every movement through satellite footage and AI-powered analysis. His name wasn't Z anymore. It hadn't been for years. To the public. Well, to the few who even knew he existed, he was Nolan Ashcroft, the enigmatic founder of an encrypted communications empire that powered most of the federal government's most classified systems. He had walked away from the public eye after a single photo leaked of him at a conference in Dubai, 10 years ago. That one grainy shot was enough to send his paranoia into overdrive. He disappeared after that, burned old IDs, built an underground network of proxies, hired ex-intelligence operatives as personal security, and let the world create legends around him. Some said he was dead. Some said he lived in a bunker under the Rockies. Others believed he had faked his death and was now living off-grid in Iceland. All were wrong. Nolan had been living in plain sight. Just not his own. The real reason he vanished wasn't about privacy. It was about control. He'd built something that could rewrite the internet itself. A hidden network, untraceable, decentralized, capable of erasing anyone or anything. He called it Omen. And he hadn't used it, yet. Because there was one person he didn't want to erase. One person who had kept him tethered to something human. Emily. The letter she sent had never really stopped. He'd saved every one. And when hers stopped, when she finally gave up, he started writing his own. Thousands of them. Pages upon pages. Every night, by hand. Stored in a hidden room behind his library wall. A chronicle of love, longing, and a life he wished he could live, but couldn't risk touching. But now something had changed. There was a reason he had finally reached out. A reason he'd broken the silence. And it wasn't just about rekindling an old friendship. Meanwhile, in Washington, a quietly aggressive woman named Agent Riley Grant had just intercepted a troubling alert. As part of the government's cybersecurity division, she monitored dark web chatter and anomalies in encrypted messaging systems. And lately, there had been whispers. Someone was running an old network that shouldn't even exist anymore. Ghost trails. Phantom data. It had the fingerprints of something built by Nolan Ashcroft years ago, back when he worked under a military research grant. The government thought they had shut that project down. But Riley knew better. She had once been Ashcroft's protégé before he went dark. And now, she was starting to think he was back. She couldn't prove it yet, but her gut told her someone had reactivated the core program. If true, it could compromise national security on a level nobody was prepared for. And the one clue she had? A strange key symbol that had recently been decoded in an intercepted package. 3 circles, 1 dot. She printed it out and pinned it to her wall, next to a red thread that now pointed to Emily Morgan. Back in Raleigh, Emily made a decision she couldn't undo. She packed an overnight bag, tucked the key into her coat pocket, and followed the coordinates attached to the letter. No explanation, just a string of numbers and a time. She left a note for her sister, telling her she was taking a few days for herself, not to worry. She didn't even know what she was looking for. Closure? Maybe. Curiosity? Definitely. But deep down, something else had taken hold of her. A pull she couldn't shake. A sense that her life as she'd known it had been on autopilot for years. Work. Sleep. Repeat. Now, suddenly, she was in a movie she hadn't auditioned for. She could feel the script unfolding even as she stepped into the unknown. What she didn't know was that someone else was following her. A quiet figure in a dark car with tinted windows, parked across the street from her apartment. He had been tracking her for weeks, ever since the key was dispatched. He didn't work for Nolan. He didn't work for the government either. He worked for someone else entirely. A silent investor who had once funded Nolan's early technology, only to be cut out when things got too dangerous. Now, that investor wanted back in. And he believed Emily was the weak link. The entry point. The variable Nolan wouldn't control. As Emily boarded the plane, a small jet with no airline branding and a mysterious ticket agent who didn't ask for ID, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're not ready for what's coming. Turn back while you can." She stared at it, fingers trembling, unsure if she should be afraid or flattered. She didn't reply. Instead, she powered off her phone and looked out the window as the aircraft took off, leaving behind the only life she'd ever known. The flight was quiet, eerily so. No other passengers. No flight attendants. Just one man in a pilot's uniform who barely spoke. After 3 hours, the plane began to descend over a forested range of snowy mountains. No signs of a city. No runways. And then, as if out of nowhere, a clearing opened below. A hidden airstrip surrounded by pine trees and high fences. The plane touched down gently, the engines humming in the cold. When the door opened, Emily stepped into a world that didn't feel real. Crisp air, silence, and a single car waiting on the tarmac. Sleek, black, windows as dark as obsidian. The driver wore gloves and didn't speak a word. Just nodded toward the back seat. Emily climbed in. The silence inside the car was nearly suffocating, broken only by the low hum of tires on a winding mountain road. Emily stared out the tinted window as pine trees rushed past in a blur, her mind spiraling through questions that had no answers. Every turn felt like it was leading her deeper into a place both strange and intimate. The air had changed. It was thinner here, colder but cleaner, and with every mile her heart beat faster, caught in a strange rhythm of fear and wonder. She hadn't said a word since boarding the plane, and neither had the driver. She didn't even know where she was, only that the GPS on her phone no longer worked, and there were no bars of service. Whatever this was, it had been designed to isolate her, to remove her from the noise of the outside world. And yet, the strangest part was that some small, irrational part of her felt safe. That feeling terrified her even more. When the car finally pulled to a stop, they were in front of a modern glass and stone structure nestled into the mountainside like it had been carved from the earth itself. No gates. No guards. Just silence and a view that stretched forever. The house looked like something out of an architecture magazine. Sharp lines, dark wood, high ceilings, and walls that were more window than anything else. She barely had time to take it all in before the door opened again and the driver simply said, "He's waiting." No name. No further instructions. Just those words. Emily stepped inside, the warmth of the interior hitting her like a wave. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something else. Something nostalgic. And then she saw him. He stood across the room with his back to her, hands in his pockets, gazing out the massive glass wall at the snowy peaks beyond. His silhouette was taller than she remembered, broader, but still carried that same stillness, like a person who lived more inside his mind than out in the world. When he turned, her breath caught. Not because of his wealth or the sharp cut of his tailored clothes, but because in an instant she saw the boy. It was in his eyes. The same ones that used to talk about stars and fears and the way silence sometimes speaks louder than noise. "Z?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I haven't heard that name in a long time," he said softly. "But yeah, it's me." Nolan, Z, walked toward her slowly, cautiously, like someone afraid to touch a dream in case it disappeared. They stood face to face for the first time in over 2 decades, and for a long moment, neither of them said a word. Then, with a trembling hand, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small worn notebook. He held it out to her. "These," he said, "are the letters I never sent." As she flipped through the pages, Emily felt her knees go weak. They weren't just letters. They were confessions, journal entries, drawings, even short poems. She recognized the cadence, the emotion. Each page was dated and signed with that single letter. Z. Her fingers stopped on one entry marked 10 years ago. "If you're reading this, then something has changed. Maybe I finally found the courage. Or maybe the danger finally caught up with me." That line stopped her cold. "Danger?" she asked, eyes locking onto his. Nolan hesitated, then motioned for her to sit. "What I'm about to tell you, you're not supposed to know. No one is. But you were the only person I ever trusted. And I can't keep running from this. Not anymore." He began to explain, slowly at first, then with growing urgency. About Omen, the system he had built years ago as a government-funded project, meant to revolutionize secure communication. About how it grew beyond its original design, evolving into something that could erase identities, reroute satellites, and access even the most protected systems in the world. It had the power to shut down economies, manipulate information, and vanish people completely. That was the real reason he disappeared. Not out of fear for his own life, but because the program had attracted people who wanted to use it for control. People with money, influence, and no regard for consequences. So he buried it. Hid the core system deep in a data fortress beneath this very mountain. But lately, someone had been trying to dig it up. Emily listened, stunned. Her mind reeled at the scale of it. She'd thought she was flying into a strange reunion, an unexpected romantic twist to a childhood story. But this wasn't about nostalgia. This was about survival. Nolan stood and walked over to a nearby wall panel. With a fingerprint and a retinal scan, a hidden door opened, revealing a tunnel lined with flickering lights. "Come with me," he said. "You need to see it." They walked in silence down the corridor, descending deeper into the mountain. The temperature dropped. The walls turned from polished stone to concrete, then steel. Finally, they reached a vault door that looked more like a bank than part of a home. Inside was a room filled with servers, monitors, and blinking lights. And in the center, a glass console with that same symbol, the 3 circles and the dot, glowing faintly. "This is Omen," he said. "And someone out there has found a back door into it." Before she could ask anything, an alarm went off. Red lights flashed. Nolan sprinted to the nearest monitor and began typing commands. His face turned pale. "They found us," he muttered. "I don't know how, but someone traced the key." Emily's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means we have minutes before this entire system gets compromised." At that moment, the power flickered, and then, an image appeared on every screen in the room. A single eye. Blinking. Watching. Then a distorted voice filled the air, low and mechanical. "Hello, Emily. We've been expecting you." She froze. "What is this? Who is that?" Nolan didn't answer. He was too busy trying to shut down the system manually. But the voice kept speaking. "We warned you not to come. And now it's too late." Suddenly, the vault door slammed shut behind them with a loud metallic boom. They were locked in. Outside, Agent Riley Grant stared at her screen inside a secure surveillance van parked 10 miles down the mountain. She had picked up a breach in one of her tracking nodes. Omen was active. She narrowed her eyes at the IP echo. Someone else was already inside. A third player. Someone she hadn't anticipated. And back at the compound, in a dark room filled with surveillance monitors and shelves of old dusty books, the investor leaned forward, watching it all unfold in real time. He smiled. "They took the bait," he said. "Now, let's see how far the girl is willing to go." Inside the vault, Emily turned to Nolan, her voice shaking. "What did you get me into?" He looked at her, and for the first time, his expression cracked. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I could protect you." And then the lights went out. "Would you like me to continue pushing toward the climax in the next section?" The door shut. Darkness swallowed the room in an instant, and the silence that followed was deafening. Emily's breath came in quick, shallow bursts as her fingers instinctively reached for Nolan. He grabbed her hand firmly, grounding her, his grip trembling slightly, either from fear or the weight of everything he'd been trying to control for so long. The screens that had once glowed with digital blue now pulsed red, and the single blinking eye returned, casting its eerie glow across the room. Somewhere deep in the heart of the Omen system, a remote AI had been triggered, one that Nolan had buried so deep in. The code he hadn't thought it possible to awaken without the original passphrase. And yet, there it was, alive, watching them, speaking directly to Emily like it knew her. Like it had been waiting. As Nolan scrambled in the dark for the backup generator switch, Emily tried to make sense of what was happening. The voice had spoken her name, not just as a threat, but as if she were somehow the reason this was all coming to a head. Then, in the flickering red light, she remembered the notebook. She opened it to the page she had stopped on earlier and turned the next few until she found an entry that sent a chill through her spine. It was dated 8 years ago. It read, "If they ever find Emily, they'll use her. Not for leverage. For access." The original code. It's tied to her. I made it that way. She was always the fail-safe. She stared at the page, the pieces falling into place. Nolan hadn't just trusted her. He had built the system with her in mind. The one person who could access or destroy it. That's why the voice said they were expecting her. That's why the investor had been tracking her. She wasn't just a loose end. She was the key. Literally and metaphorically. Nolan had encoded parts of Omen with biometric security tied to her childhood letters. Her phrasing, her word choices, even her handwriting had become part of the encryption system. Omen had been taught to recognize her as a master user. The generator finally kicked on with a shudder, and the room lit back up, but the damage had already been done. The system had been breached. Riley Grant, still watching from the mobile command van, saw the entire interface hijacked. The 3-circle symbol had now been replaced with that blinking eye. She barked orders into her radio, but the truth was, she was too far out and too late. Someone else was in control now. And whoever it was had bypassed even the ghost protocols Nolan had written to protect the data. Inside the vault, Nolan stared at the screens, his face gray. "They've locked me out," he said flatly. They used you to rewrite the command structure. Emily, you're the only one left who can shut it down. But I don't even know how, she said, panic creeping into her voice. You don't have to, he replied. Omen does. It sounded insane, but it was true. Omen had evolved. It wasn't just code anymore. It was an adaptive AI that had learned from everything it had been exposed to. And for nearly 20 years, it had been absorbing the language, emotional tone, and thought patterns of a single person, Emily. Her letters, her words, her expressions. Nolan had taught the system to trust her voice as its compass. And now, with everything on the line, she was its last anchor to sanity. With a deep breath, Emily stepped forward to the central console. The blinking eye followed her every move. She placed her hand on the glass. The system scanned her palm. A low chime rang out. Then the AI's voice returned, less mechanical now, almost human. Final command input accepted. Awaiting directive. Nolan looked at her. You can shut it down. But once you do, everything tied to Omen goes. All the backups. All the data. All the security architecture. It'll wipe the system clean. You'd be erasing something that people would kill to control. Emily nodded slowly. That's exactly why it has to go. But just as she was about to speak the shutdown phrase Nolan had whispered to her, the screens went black again, and a new voice came through the system. It was the investor. Come. Cold. Calculated. I thought you might do this, he said. That's why I added my own insurance. A second later, another face appeared on the screen, and Emily's knees nearly gave out. It was her sister. Bound. Frightened. Live video feed. The investor had her. Turn the system off, the voice said, and she dies. But if you input the final key sequence, not only will she live, you'll be free. Wealth beyond your dreams. You'll disappear, and no one will ever bother you again. It was a trap with no clean answer. Shut it down and lose her sister. Activate it, and give the most dangerous man in the world control over an untraceable system. Nolan looked at her, helpless. He had no countermeasure for this. But Emily had something no one counted on. She turned to the console. Omen, she said clearly, run the following protocol, Rachel. Nolan's eyes widened. Rachel was the name of Emily's childhood dog, the one she'd written about in dozens of her letters. The one that symbolized trust, protection, loyalty. A word the system had likely associated with defense. The AI paused. Then responded, Protocol Rachel activated. Perimeter threat prioritized. Secondary video feed analyzed. Suddenly, the screen showing her sister's captivity zoomed out and displayed heat signatures. The system had tracked the location. It had already located the room. A drone had been dispatched 5 minutes earlier when the system first detected an anomaly near Emily's voice print. The feed cut to live satellite imagery, Emily's sister being rescued by 2 unknown operatives in tactical gear. Threat neutralized, the AI said. Emily exhaled, trembling. Then, looking back at the console, she spoke clearly. Shut it down. Final command. Terminate Omen. The eye blinked once. Goodbye, Emily. And just like that, the entire system went dark. Outside, Riley's monitors flatlined. No trace of the network. No echo signatures. Gone in the aftermath, Nolan and Emily stood in silence, surrounded by the dying hum of cooling servers. For the first time in years, he looked lighter, unburdened. And Emily, she looked stronger. She hadn't just been a childhood friend. She had been the linchpin in a story far bigger than either of them. Weeks later, back in her apartment, Emily opened the last letter Nolan had written before everything went dark. It read, If you're reading this, then the world is finally quiet. I hope you're safe. I hope you're happy. You saved me in ways I can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, you saved all of us. She smiled softly, folded the letter, and placed it in a box marked, Letters from Z. Then she looked out her window, just in time to see a black car pull away from the curb, disappearing into the morning fog. And for a brief second, she could have sworn she saw the 3 circles in it, glowing faintly on the license plate. Would you like a short video outro script to wrap it all up for your YouTube audience?